It's 6 o'clock.
I'm Alec Blackman. The general election could affect a campaign to get justice for the thousands of people given contaminated blood through NHS transfusions, according to a Coventry man who's been fighting since the 1980s. More than 2,000 people, mainly haemophiliacs, have died after being given infected blood. The government's already reforming the compensation scheme for sufferers, but those affected say the election means that reform is now on the back burner. Joseph Peaty from Aldesley contracted HIV and hepatitis B and C through contaminated blood used to treat his haemophilia. He says it's not just the compensation scheme that'll be delayed.
The response that we can expect in relation to Panorama's coverage of the scandal and the need for further public scrutiny and a public inquiry.
And we'll have much more on this story throughout the morning here on BBC Coventry and Warwickshire.
A man from Coventry was amongst thousands of people infected with blood diseases in the 1970s and 80s. You'll hear his story in just a moment, but he says he's worried about the snap general election and how that will damage their campaign. Well, Joseph Peaty contracted HIV and hepatitis B and C through contaminated NHS blood products he was given to treat a blood clotting disorder. It's a story that you might have seen covered on BBC's Panorama programme last night. Well, Joseph is with me in the studio now. Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning, Trish.
You're leading this tainted blood campaign. You're calling for a public inquiry into what happened. But before we talk about that, tell us your story.
Okay, so I'm a haemophiliac. Haemophilia is a genetic condition, so I was born with it, but I was the first in our family. I had early treatment with cryoprecipitate, which was taken from just a few donors and made into a treatment that helped my blood clot. And I developed, it's a complex thing, but I developed a resistance to it. So after I was about 5 years old, I couldn't have it anymore. I didn't have regular treatment until basically the early 1980s. And at that time, I was then exposed with experimental products to this new form of clotting agent and infected with HIV, hepatitis C, hepatitis A and B as well. But unbeknownst to me, the risks were largely known, but they were not passed on to people like myself and others that use these products. The government knew, the scientists knew of the risks, but for some reason they decided that the risks outweighed the benefits, or should I say the benefits outweighed the risks of using this treatment.
Although we have to say the government and the scientists aren't here to defend themselves, so that is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But when they sort of approached you, Joseph, to say, look, we've got this experimental drug, there may be some risks involved. What did you think? Were you sort of desperate for any treatment to make you be better?
Well, what we heard on Panorama last night is that the biggest killer for haemophiliacs in that era would have been something like a brain hemorrhage, a head bleed, and they would estimate that maybe as many as 10 people a year could have died from something like that. If you look at that over the decades, 4 decades on, you might have been looking at something in the order of, say, 400 people that would have died, instead of which we saw 5,000 plus haemophiliacs infected and over 2,000 deaths. And this balance of benefits versus risks, we've never seen an explanation from government about what the process was, what the scientific analysis was that would lead them to think that it was more beneficial to use this infected product.
How has what's happened to you? How has it affected your life, Joseph?
I've got to be honest, it's incredibly emotional to talk about. It's permeated every second of my existence every day. These conditions, we always said with haemophilia, it should never define the person. And I never let haemophilia define me. I still managed to live. But these viruses, they get into every part of my life. They've devastated me physically, emotionally, psychologically. Every day that I have to take this medication, I have to make it up and then take it twice a day. It's a constant reminder for my HIV, this is, of how I arrived here of the information that was withheld and of the use of these products, not in my case for life-saving treatments, but the school I was at and the haemophilia centre that was attached to that school, they were at the cutting edge and they wanted to try and make my daily existence better. But there were some doctors that were in the 80s trying to source products that were heat-treated and safer.
I mean, you've come in today in the studio, Joseph, in your wheelchair, in your assisted wheelchair. What quality of life have you got?
Well, it's been stripped back. It just doesn't bear any comparison to what I had even as a haemophiliac. You know, haemophilia can be difficult. You get a bleed, you'd have to rest, they can be painful. This affects me every day. I'm now, because of the viruses, I've been so severely disabled by them that I'm in an electric wheelchair permanently. I have to have care support. I can't go on holiday at a drop of a hat like somebody else. I need specialist equipment.
So what will this public inquiry do? I mean, you know, to be brutal, Joseph, do you want compensation? Do you want cash? Or do you want an apology? What do you want to get out of this public inquiry?
Look, all along, we've asked for the government to provide recompense that would balance up the scales of us losing our careers, of having to deal with the illnesses and so on. But one thing that is overriding beyond everything over the last 4 decades is we want the answers to this. We want full disclosure. We want access to all of these papers that the government have got archived that protect the pharmaceuticals, or perhaps describe what arrangements were made with the pharmaceutical companies that provided these and whether there were protections afforded to them.
Well, this could take years, as you know, and it's going to be a lot of money, a lot of public money, and people listening might think, well, actually, you know, it's awful what's happened, but it was a terrible medical mistake. Shouldn't you just kind of just almost live with it, Joseph? And
the government would very much like us to do that, but unfortunately for 2,000 people, more than 2,000 people in fact, they couldn't live with it. They've died from it. And for me, living with it on a daily basis, it's not as simple as just getting on with life and putting it behind you.
But if you get a sort of, I know, £100,000, say, you get compensation financially, would that be enough? I mean, have you got a figure of what you want to be recompensed with?
If you were to look at this, and the government conveniently banned the word compensation around as if they've paid it. They've never admitted liability.
But what difference? What difference, Joseph? What would make the difference? What would be the result of you want from a public inquiry? How much money would make a difference?
So first and foremost, the public inquiry, full disclosure, would provide the answers to why we got here, how we got here. It would give us lessons for the future. It would also explain why what we think there's been a massive cover-up.
So that's more important to you, Joseph, to disclose this, what you say is a cover-up, rather than be compensated.
They do go hand in hand, but we do need these answers, and to be compensated would just provide us with that ability to live day to day again. I've lost my career because of these viruses.
What were you doing?
And at the time, when this all started out, I was looking forward to a career in computing and so on. I ended up having to change those plans, and I ended up in finance and admin and working in a leading secondary school. But at the end of all of this, I lost that career. I was left to have to deal with the fallout from these viruses, from the illness, the emotion, the physical damage. And if I was to ask for help for this, first of all, the question is, can you afford to pay for the damage that we have caused out of your own pocket? And if you can't, then maybe we'll help you.
Joseph, we will continue to look at this story. It's something which is going to obviously run and run and run. We will keep an eye on this. If you want to watch the BBC Panorama again, it's on BBC iPlayer. You're listening to BBC Coventry and Warwickshire. Thank you, Joseph, for coming in.
Thank you very much.